Hi, and welcome to City Scene with Mayor Mike Cahill. I'm your host, Walt Kosmowski. Your Honor, welcome.
Hi, Walt. Great to see you.
And you've brought a guest with you today, and I'd like audience, you've been on our show before, Irina Keefe, who is the Director of Sustainability. Did I get that right?
You got it right.
For the city. So looks like we're going to be talking about planning stuff and overall planning for development in the city. But having said that, maybe I could start off with a general question for our audience. What really is the planning policy to effectively manage growth and development in the city? Where does it start? How does it get through the system, and what kind of discussions have to happen?
First, can I just do this? I know I did it last show, but every time I see you, you look more comfortable. It's the retirement thing.
There you go.
And now I understand you're at the gym every day.
At the gym every day, good healthy blood cells flowing through. Yes.
Jack LaLanne.
Jack's had his day.
Listen. You asked a quick question, and I want to share. So, the city of Beverly has a master plan, as most communities do. Our last two master plans, one that was written right around the year 2000, and one that was written over about 2.5 years and completed just before and just during the COVID shutdown. So it's really been, a lot of what's in the master plan has been reinforced over the last 25 years. And that's, we know we need housing. And even though there's been a real spurt of housing built over the last 8 to 10 years, prior to that, Beverly was well below the state average from 2000 to 2010 on new housing. We've been above it for the last 10 years. But it kind of averages out. The reality is that as a community, we continue to need some new housing. We continue to need investment in our economic sector, our businesses, creating jobs, paying good taxes for commercial and industrial buildings. And what we've done as a community together is stated a value of, let's try to do that development as redevelopment where buildings already are, not where it is woods and we're going to cut down woods and lose green space and natural assets. So that's been a priority for quite some time. Together with that, we have 4 train stations, and there's been a strong belief in Beverly, again, going back 2 master plans, that we need to embrace the thought of walkable downtowns, taking advantage of public transportation. Now, when you build a building next to a train station, not everybody who moves in is going to take the train back and forth to work every day or for everything they do.
But it's available if they want to.
It's available, and what you do find is there are fewer cars that come with residential buildings around trains and subways, et cetera, and those cars make fewer trips. People do more of what they need by walking or by taking the public transit. And that's an established model really around the world. So our master plan embraces the same. And then, we try to revisit really constantly how it's going and, what kind of tweaks might need to be made to our zoning. We've done that a few times in my time as mayor, and I think we're in the middle of a conversation to do that again. Yeah.
Now, how does, the term smart growth, you touched on a little bit, tell us how smart growth factors into the planning process.
Sure. Well, I'll take this. I mean, you've got about a bunch of questions for Rena that I'm going to let her handle because she knows all the details. But on this one, smart growth suggests that you try to focus your additional residential around your downtowns. And in Beverly, we've got our main downtown, but we also have several neighborhood, centers. And so over time, it used to be, before the automobile became king and queen, right? It used to be that we had those neighborhood centers and people did more, walking and biking to pick up what they needed at the corner store or whatnot. And we're trying to get back to that in some sense. So it doesn't mean that there will be no investment out along the highway in our commercial industrial parks. It doesn't mean there'll be no new houses or apartments built in our outlying neighborhoods. It does mean that the more of the focus in the planning for needed development is to have it where there is infrastructure, where there are stores and services, where there is a train station nearby,
Yeah.
et cetera.
And of course, that requires a lot of what you're talking about requires zoning amendments. So, talk about some of the proposed zoning amendments that are before the city council right now, and why are they hitting all right now? I mean, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So as part of the master planning process, there were a lot of things that came clear. Now, again, this process ran from about 2017, early 2018 through 2019 into 20. The shutdown kind of paused it, and then we went back and did some more work. But a lot of the conversation, we had many community forums. We had a lot of different ways for people to give input. And things that came through were the degree of density along Rantoul Street, specifically the extra height that came with the tall building overlay. Tall building overlay was created in the late 2000s to try to provide for additional density, right by the train. People decided, really as a community, that we wanted to bring that back down some. People also decided they didn't want the Cabot Street experience to mirror the Rantoul Street experience. And so those are two of the changes that we proposed. They would have come sooner, but there was also a recommendation in the master plan to really rewrite our design standards for what buildings need to look like. What design, how do they look going up from the sidewalk, whatever height they may be, what types of relief, what types of materials, that kind of thing, trying to keep a certain character. So we did that, and now we've got some proposals to reverse the tall building overlay on Rantoul. What it would mean, if passed, is that the building height on Rantoul would go back to 55 feet for all buildings. There was a stretch around the train station where you could get a special permit to go up to 75 feet. Right. And that happened on a few projects, but the goal is to reverse that for the remaining parcels. Cabot Street is 55-foot zoning. It has been for, I think, about 60 years. People don't really know that because most of the buildings on Cabot aren't that high.
Yeah.
So we've got a proposal to bring the Cabot Street heights down to 45 feet and no more than 4 stories. Now, some of those buildings are already at 45-ish or above, and some have 4 stories. We don't anticipate necessarily a lot of movement on Cabot Street, partly because the lots aren't that deep, and you need deeper lots to create the opportunity for parking on site, which we require with new housing development. So those are a couple of proposals. One is to go down to 45 feet on Cabot. One is to go back down to 55 feet on Rantoul. Then there are all the houses between Cabot and Rantoul, which are mostly 2 families, 3 families, and they're mostly in the range of 30 to 40 feet high. But the zoning there, again, for probably 60 years has been 55 feet. Yeah. And that's everything between Cabot and Rantoul. So we're looking to bring that down to, I think it's 40 feet. Yeah. So it's like a 3-story, 3.5-story kind of max. And that really fits the character. So these proposals, in a lot of ways, fit the character that's been there for a long time in these different neighborhoods within downtown. Cabot Street from Elliott Street, right by Super Sub, down to Gloucester Crossing, will remain in the 35-foot, which it's been really all along. Then there's one other proposal right now, and that's we recognize that it's really hard for working people to continue to afford to live in Beverly as some of the rents have gone up, and that's been a function. It's really been a function of where we are in relation to Boston and how desirable our community is. People want to be here. They want to live here and call it home. And so we are looking to increase the demands on new housing development, to say to developers, if you build, you right now we require either 8% of the new units built be affordable at under 60% of area median income, or 12% of them be affordable at under 80% of area median income. What that means is we're trying to prioritize a deeper affordability. An individual who makes about $55,000 a year is under 60% of area median income. A family of 4 that makes about $85,000 is under 60%. Right. And that kind of, people in that income range are struggling to find affordable housing in Beverly. Right. So we're looking to require an increase from 8% of those units to 12%. So any new construction, 12% of the units are going to have to be affordable under 60% of the area median income. Right. And so those are in front of the city council right now, those proposals.
Yeah. Now, there was just the other day, there was a public hearing with the planning board, city council. Tell us about that. What's the next steps in that process?
Yeah, and that is maybe the last bit you want to hear from me, because Rena's got some great news on some of our sustainability work. But the city council and the planning board are required to hold a joint public hearing whenever a proposed zoning change comes forward. So they had that hearing last night at the city council meeting. The city council decided to close their portion of the hearing. They felt they got the input that questions they had. They got a lot of presentation by the planning department. They had some members of the public speak. The planning board decided they wanted to hold their portion of it open. So they continued their part of the public hearing to their meeting next week. They have a planning board meeting December 13th. I believe it's at 7 p.m. So they're going to continue that public hearing and conversation, because under our ordinances, the planning board needs to make a recommendation to the city council before the city council votes on the proposal. Now, the planning board recommendation doesn't automatically mean that's how the city council will act. It's for something, against something, with some changes, whatnot. But it's, they're a volunteer board with a good deal of expertise and a lot of commitment to this community. So, they have a role here, and they're going to weigh in. And the council will obviously listen carefully to what they have to say, as well as to what members of the public have been saying and said during the public hearing. Yeah. So those are the next steps in terms of what the council will or won't do with the proposals. That's the legislative process in the city.
Right. Now, I'm going to change the subject a little bit, but we've seen a lot of solar construction around town recently. In fact, right here, right next, where the studio here is in the high school, and we just put a lot of solar up on the in the parking lot. And I'm wondering, is that connected and on yet, or does that still have to be connected to the grid? What's the status of that, and what can we see in the future? Irina, you're up.
Yeah, we wish it was all connected and online by now, but not yet.
Yeah.
Most of the projects need to be sort of plugged in and ready to be connected to the grid by the year's end.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing outside, especially that's the biggest array outside the high school along the hillside, and that replaced an array, one of the oldest in the country, one of 8 sites that were selected in 1981 as part of President Carter's solar initiative.
Yes.
And the majority of those panels have now come down. There's one still left. You can see it. It's a very clear difference between the technology from the 80s, the original solar panels, and what we see today.
Yeah.
So a lot more efficient, but we're keeping that row so that students and just the broader community will be able to kind of learn from and kind of hopefully take some tours and explore the difference between the two sets of technology.
Yeah.
The arrays themselves are going to produce more than about 5 million kilowatt hours, which is equivalent to powering over 600 homes annually.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
That's per year, right? Yeah.
And that'll be going on now once it's all hooked up for about 25 years.
Yeah.
And that's great, clean, and renewable energy right here in Beverly for all that time.
Absolutely. Now, are there are there other spaces like that are kind of earmarked, or you're thinking about for solar panels around the city? Where might they be?
Yeah. So for today, and as part of this project this year, we are solar canopies. They're canopy structures over parking lots at the high school and the middle school. And then the 2 downtown parking lots on Pond Street, so behind the Cabot Lodge and Worthy Girl, that area. And then there's rooftop arrays that are at City Hall, the Senior Center, and at the middle school. And then what else do we have here is the battery structure. So any solar development by law is required, if it's over a certain size, to have storage. And that means that as the electricity is generated, there's a place and an area for the kind of electrons to go, that energy to go and be stored to be pulled out when we need it most.
Oh, okay. So it is. See, I have solar panels on my house, and I don't have storage. It just goes right to the grid. I have a meter that goes both ways. So when I'm producing, the meter says that it's going to the grid, and if I'm not producing or it's night and we have appliances going and heating, I'm taking in. So you're required to have the batteries to store that, right?
Yep, by the tennis courts and the basketball court, by the high school, just because this array it's a 0.5 megawatt large. It exceeds that threshold. And I think we got to do our next spotlight at Walt's house, because Walt has what, solar and heat pumps.
We have heat pumps and solar. Yeah, we compost, so we're good citizens.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll do a video tour.
All the way around. Well, good.
So those are the existing. That's the existing project from 2022.
Yeah.
And that is kind of in addition to the solar sites that we already have, including a 5 megawatt project over the former landfill off of Brimble Ave.
Right.
Yep. And then we have a 2.6 megawatt array at the airport. And then as we look ahead, all of the projects that we're talking about now kind of generate enough solar credits to offset all of the electricity from the city's needs. So to meet the
Wow.
city's kind of operational needs, all of our electricity accounts from our buildings.
Yeah.
So, we're covered at this point, and I think moving forward in the future, we'd like to, ideally be able to set up a situation where, as we bring more projects online, looking at opportunities at the elementary school rooftops, which will soon be replaced
Yeah.
in the next 5-10 years, that we'd be able to add solar panels on those
Yeah.
roofs as well.
Yeah.
So what a lot of people probably remember is when we did our elementary school building program back in the late 90s, we built a school a year, McEwen being the oldest of the 6.
Yeah.
It was opened in 1997, I believe. So you think about that. That roof is 25 years
Yeah,
old.
right.
And then each of the other 5 elementary school roofs are a year younger.
Right.
But we're tracking and watching those, and we're likely to be replacing those roofs maybe 2-3 at a time in the coming
Right.
years. That's an opportunity for rooftop at those schools, and potentially some parking lot canopies as well. You should touch on the police station, though.
Yes, so that will be the next project. Oh yeah, that's not conceptual. That one is being planned actively. So the police station is.
So there are no panels on the police station now, right, Irina?
Not yet. Not yet.
but
They're
okay.
coming. So we've been calling the police station a nearly net zero building because it is powered by geothermal sort of ground source
Right,
heat pumps that cover the electricity for the building.
Yeah.
So it's fully electrified. There's no burning of fossil fuels on site, and in I believe what are we at an 18-month timeline or so. In the next couple of years, we'll see more solar added to the roofs of the police station and also over the parking lot in the back.
Yeah. Now, did I hear you say that right now or anticipated all of the city-owned building, all of the city needs will be satisfied with our own electrical generation capabilities?
So it's complex because the state laws and federal laws around tax don't let a municipality get the same tax benefits that a for-profit solar developer might. So we're not owning these arrays, we're leasing.
Okay.
And so we're not actually at present using that electricity we create on site. The solar developer is selling it into the grid.
Right.
And we've got a power purchase agreement with that.
Okay,
So
okay.
we get credits on our
Yeah.
electrical bills. The
Right.
good thing is we're hosting solar that helps offset our footprint.
Yeah.
And the key to that is we want to use electricity, not gas or oil. But the electricity is only really green if it's electricity generated by clean and renewable sources, not by those same fossil fuels.
right,
And that's
exactly.
what we're really aiming for.
Yeah.
And so that when Irina talks about that capacity, it's that clean and renewable we're creating that gets credited against our own use, which right now is oil at Centerville School because there's no gas in Centerville, and it's gas at the other schools until we can eventually get behind the meter with electricity we can use on site. The police station, the hope is we're going to be able to use that electricity on site.
Right. Now, under your administration, Mike, the city put on a grants writer, and my question is, are we getting in grants that will help some of these sustainability projects in the city? How is that working? Tell us a little bit about
Millions and millions a year,
Okay.
all told, in grants.
Right.
Catherine Barrett's our grant director.
Right.
She's fantastic. And
Right.
I'm going to turn it to Irina because she's hip deep in all of these grants and doing great work with them.
that. Yeah, give us an idea of some of these grants.
Yeah, so Catherine gave me an overall sense of what we pulled in, mostly she. So she works with all the 20-some departments in the city
Yeah.
to help to write grants, apply for them, manage them with many city departments. So in total, just last fiscal year, the city brought in and the schools brought in over 110 grants, totaling 28. I think that's supposed to be $1 million, and not $28,000. So, and that's separated from or includes a federal grant from the ARPA program of over $12 million. So that's the kind of big picture. We do a lot of work that is grant funded, and especially the work in the sustainability office is kind of operated through grants that we get. So they kind of span every category. Some are managed by our engineering departments. Say if we're thinking about waste reduction, the engineering department kind of manages our waste operations, and they've brought in, I believe it was $44,000 in recycling dividends programs. So the more initiatives that we have around the city that show how we can reduce waste, the more we get incentivized by these grant funds to roll out additional programs. So for example, the pilot compost site at Bessie Baker Park is a space where any resident of Beverly can sign up for free and drop their food scraps from their whatever they cook in their kitchen at home, and drop it off for free. And now that we know there's an appetite for that, people like to see that type of service, then we can think about expanding it. And as we expand, we get more credit from the state to continue funding some of the work.
Yeah.
Yep.
So is it? Can I look at this, or can a citizen of Beverly look at this and say, before we had a grant writer and got grants in, this is like you mentioned the $28 million. That's like having an extra $28 million in your budget, right? Free money, or?
So the grant director, when I ran for office the first time, I said, we need a grant director. We don't get easy money from for the state and federal government. They don't see Beverly as a community that's that needy. But we have real needs.
Yeah.
If a grant director brings in $1 more than they cost, you've won. Our grant director is awesome, and she brings in millions more than she makes.
Yeah.
And look, some grants we would get anyway. It's not those grants we're really talking about. We get some 911 grant funding into the police department because we run our own dispatch.
Right.
She helps the police department staff with the reporting and whatnot. That's helpful to them to keep their folks from having to spend too much time on it. But she researches and applies for and gets us grants, much more competitive grants that we wouldn't automatically be considered for.
Yeah.
For example, the resilience study on the Bass River. I know we had some outside help with that because it's a special environmental type, but Catherine worked extensively on that. You want to touch on that one?
Sure. So we have plenty of other grants that we can jump into as well, but we do have a new study that's going to be launched in the next couple of months called the Bass River Resilience Study.
Right.
Yep, and that is funded very generously by the Massachusetts Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, which is really helping to allow cities sort of give capacity to the cities to do studies and do projects that will help protect communities from the impacts of climate change. So in this case, along the Bass River, which is tidally influenced, so whenever there's high tide in the ocean, the tide's going to go up along the river as well. Right. And we know that that is a vulnerable area. There's been, we have some sort of basic models about what's going to happen to the area in the event of a really strong storm or hurricane. And so we know that we need to put in the energy now, because this is one of those areas that could be ripe for development, that has several larger parcels that more can be done with. So how do we make sure that any development that may take place there is done in a way that's protected and helps to improve access for the community members living around and for the broader community to access the river? So this study is going to, $200,000 from the state to do coastal modeling, so to do an analysis of these different scenarios. What might happen under a scenario where there's really high emissions, and how do we then create these conceptual designs, like plans, to see what we can do? How can we intervene to reduce the risk of flood in that area?
And now, what was the name of the state agency or of this program that you mentioned before? I had a real long name. What's it called?
We get a lot of grants from different state agencies. This one in particular is the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program. We call it MVP for short.
Okay, Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness.
Well, it's the impacts of climate change that we're already seeing.
I was just going to say,
and that we'll see in the future. How to prepare, how to get ourselves. Here's an example. When Arena talks about that Bass River waterfront, that's a whole area. Within that is the city-owned McPherson Youth Center. We're in the process, just starting to try to design a future for that center. And we're likely going to need to raise the level of the parcel in order to support the building that's there, or maybe a future building. Yeah. And yet we can't do that in a vacuum either. It's got to be done in the context of the whole of the riverfront, because that as sea levels rise, we already see flooding and really bad storms.
Yeah.
As sea levels rise, the storm surges at high tide during storms will be worse than that. So,
of course.
What we see in a lot of low-lying coastal areas is, trying to prepare for current flooding and future flooding by having some of that coastline be floodable. You can enjoy it most of the year as parkland, but when it's a really bad storm event and it floods,
Yeah.
it floods. And that holds the water and it protects other properties further inland, as an example.
I remember several years ago over at the Carriage House over at Lynch Park, there was a consulting firm that came and they put posts in the ground in that area, the grassy area in front of the shell, and they showed by markers on these posts. They were about 3 feet high. What to expect in the future. I forget the years, but it was like 2030, 2040, 2050, and if you get a 50% storm and sea rise, and potentially that area in front of the shell could be under 2 feet of water in 2 or 3 years. This is exactly what you're talking
Well,
about.
and that campus is an example of we're going to try to get a grant to do that resilience study soon.
Yeah.
That whole Lynch Park campus is something we're looking at, trying to in a more holistic master planning kind of way.
Yeah. Now, I want to make sure I say this right, but what can Beverly residents expect from the new federal funding that's related to the Inflation Reduction Act is one, and the bipartisan infrastructure law? What can people expect from some of the funding related to that? What's happening there?
So the Inflation Reduction Act funding, I think, is going to be a game changer for residents. I'll back up by saying that in Beverly, we, with the City of Salem, have launched what we call the Beverly and Salem Energy Challenge to try to help to encourage community members to retrofit their buildings. What does that mean? It means to protect it from the elements, to feel more comfortable at home, hopefully to save some money, and really upgrade these, sometimes 19th century, 18th century homes that we have around town to be able to kind of withstand climate impacts that we know are coming, and to lower their utility bills season over season, summertime and wintertime. So as part of that effort, we've been, and you may have seen some people around town, we've started this kind of boots on the ground campaign to try to get people to sign up for home energy assessments.
Right.
And in the first 6 months of the program, since we've gotten the message out there, we've seen, I think our program participation has quadrupled in the Mass Save program. And weatherization projects. So that's like insulating your walls or ceiling around the joist of the foundation of your basement. We've seen those projects doubled just in the first 6 months of the program. So we think, amazing job, and we're really excited for what's to come in terms of helping people make some of the harder transformations that are going to save more money and make a bigger impact in terms of energy reduction. And those would be moves like one you've already made, which is to install heat pumps at your home.
Right.
So in 2023, you'll be able to access tax credits. So you missed out, I'm sorry to report, but you'll be able to get tax credits for installing heat pumps or for insulating your home. And they're going to offer upfront discounts to kind of take the edge off. Sometimes the greener, cleaner item costs more, and there's a premium to have a more, a system with greater efficiency. So these upfront discounts, which are going to be announced, well, I don't know. They still don't know how exactly to roll this program out, I think, because it's so new. But we expect to see a lot of the funding coming through the state agencies. And you'll see, I think it's about $14,000 maximum in how much each home can get for electrification, which will really help to make a decision when some of the work is really expensive.
And by electrification, Arena means if you're heated with gas, if you're heated with oil, it's making that transition to an air source heat pump typically.
Right.
To a system that runs on electricity instead of burning oil, instead of burning gas.
Right.
And then we know that we can clean up the electricity by adding more renewable sources.
Yeah. And I have to say, I installed the heat pumps to get heat during the wintertime. But one of the benefits is it cools the house because it works just like a radiator. Okay, so you can, during the hot weather, it's a heat pump, so it works on the differential in the temperature. So during the summer, I can turn that on and I can get my house cool within minutes. It's nice and cool and air conditioned in my house.
It's such a misnomer.
Yeah.
Because it's called a heat pump, but really
But-
one of the greatest benefits that people don't know is that it cools
Yeah.
and that it provides that air conditioning.
Yeah.
So really, everybody at home already has one, item appliance that
Yeah.
functions like a heat pump, and that's your refrigerator.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a very similar mechanism. It just can turn, into the
Yeah.
opposite direction.
Exactly,
Heating too.
exactly. We could just have a couple of probably a minute left. Anything in closing that you would like to mention to our audience along the lines of what we've been talking about?
Arena?
I'm okay. I think we covered a lot.
How,
Well, I do want to say that more to follow because there's a press release coming from the state, but the city of Beverly has been celebrated just this morning by the State Department of Energy Resources because of all the fantastic work that ARENA, our Clean Energy Advisory Committee, our city council, my colleagues in the city council, and our community as a whole have been doing around clean energy in this city for the past so many years. We became a green community in 2011. That was, the city opted into a new state law back around then that made some grant funding available for us to start taking these steps around weatherization and energy efficiencies. And it led to some improvements in several of our schools. It led to us swapping out 3,800 street light bulbs and putting in LEDs
right,
to take their
that's
place,
right,
which
yeah.
saves the city money and requires less electricity to power, which decreases our carbon footprint, all these things. And, many people have been involved. Mayor Scanlon, the city council then, our city council, our administration, lots of people working, all kind of pulling in the same direction
Yeah.
to help Beverly do our part, just like every city and town in the world's got to do their part to drive down
Yeah.
greenhouse gas emissions and make sure our kids and grandkids have a great earth
have a
to live
great-
on, and a great life to live.
Well, on that note, Mr. Mayor, Irina, thank you for being guests here. And I'd like to remind our viewers that you've been watching City Scene with Mayor Mike Cahill. I'm your host, Walt Kosmowski. Thank you for watching.